Well, in April, the World Bank released a report that businesses in Nigeria lose about $29 billion annually as a result of the country's unreliable electricity. It also observed that Nigeria had the largest number of people without access to electricity in the world, as everyone in 10 people have without access to electricity. Now, this has birthed an opportunity to better serve these communities through mini-grids, which use existing distribution and incorporate distributed energy sources. Minigrid, which is an off-grid electricity distribution network, involves small-scale electricity generation, and it seems to be gaining popularity in Nigeria. Last month, an institute in collaboration with Abadan Electricity Distribution Company started the country's first commercial on-the-grid mini-grid in a rural community, cross boundaries, also in a similar line. And that's why we have with us now Nina Afani Itemwagbo, the Senior Manager, Customer Experience, Power Gen, Renewable Energy, to tell us about what they are doing with mini grids in Nigeria. Good to have you, Nina. Good morning.
Same here. Good morning. Good morning.
Okay, so tell us, let's start with, what are mini grids?
You just already said that when you used your introduction.
Let's hear from the pro.
All right. Just a simple, basic explanation of what mini-grids are. Like you rightfully said, mini-grids are off-grid electricity distribution network involving small-scale electricity generation. Plain simple.
Well, how does it work, really?
How does it work? Okay, so you have components that are used in the mini-grid sector. Basically, which is a scaled-down version of what you have with the larger discos. You have the key major components are your solar PV panels, you have your batteries, you have your storage banks, you have your inverters, and of course, you would have maybe like a backup generator that for the period when the solar peak isn't at its highest peak. So basically, there are components which come together, which you would definitely deploy in a location or community that are either underserved or, or totally off-grid, and be able to power up the communities using solar generated from the sun.
Okay, right. So we know that some states have attempted to produce power,
yes,
but there are some legal hurdles, yes, that limits, the amount of power that can be produced. And these are states, these are governments. For you as a private entity delving into supply of power, right, what legal hurdles or what legal freedom do you have? Yeah. And how much can you produce?
Okay, so it actually varies, right? You can actually do between lower kilowatts to, up to 1 megawatt for a mini grid. However, there are regulations guiding how we operate, and kudos to the REA and, of course, the Power Ministry, as well as other, credible organizations that partner with them to create an enable environment for power gen that I work for, as well as other mini developers that are in the sector. So basically, what we do, how is it possible for them to be able to do this? It's easy because one of the key things is the regulations and policies that guides, our operations, which has been made very, very transparent. There's a lot of stakeholder engagement, both on the part of the government, both on the part of REA, which is more or less like a guiding agency that oversees what we do, as well as other organizations that partner to provide funding and grants to enable us to be able to carry out this. So regulation is one of the key things. Policy driving this is something that the administration, the current administration, has been driving essentially, and which has obviously helped, drive the work that we're currently doing across different states within the country.
All right, so talking about, an enabling environment, yeah, the Rural Electrification Agency has promised to, create an enabling environment. Can you give us a picture on what it's like presently? Okay.
All right. So just a little bit of a sneak peek into how this has, worked out across board. So for us as private sector in developers in coming into the power sector to try and, fill in the gap, the electricity gap that we have, and be able to create and provide power to last mile communities that don't have. So one of the good things that the REA has been able to achieve is, ensuring that, the enable environment in terms of regulations, the regulations that would guide how this is operated, how this is managed, as well as also looking at possible ways of, supporting developers in this space to be able to create an environment whereby we get some form of rebate or subsidies, from the government as regards to how we, import the components that we require and bring them into the country, as well as tax waivers that would also help us to be able to, do more and be able to reach more communities that are, totally off-grid. So that's one of the key things that's been very helpful in doing, as well as, we have World Bank as well as the AFDB, which has also come into play to also provide funding for some of the key things that we need to be able to drive, the achievements that we're currently seeing.
So is your major target the off-grid or the rural area, or is it just anywhere? And how accessible are you to an average Nigerian?
Great question, Ini. To answer your question this way, right? Now, mini-grids can be used in off-grid, totally off-grid or underserved communities. Now, totally off-grid, we have communities that are not going to be powered by the discos. It's not in their 5-year or 10-year rollout plan, right, for the discos. So in such areas, we come in and we look at the gaps that are there, and we try and fill in that gaps by providing power to such communities. However, we also have another component which speaks to the interconnected mini-grids, whereby we, complement and collaborate with the discos to power up such communities that are underserved and have, commercial and industrial industries within such communities. So you have the interconnected mini-grids that speaks to such larger communities, or urban, semi-urban, or peri-urban communities, as well as the off-grids as well.
All right, so, presently the world is moving towards, electric vehicles, right, and EVs. But, looking at Nigeria at some point would have to catch up.
Definitely.
What role would the mini-grids actually play, when it comes to electric vehicles?
Oh, that's interesting.
No, clean energy.
Clean energy, right. Right, that's an interesting question, Ladi. So with the mini-grid sector, one of the good things, I'll have you know that, speaking to that already, we're already, going into that area, already exploring that. I'll let you know that, okay, that in the mini-grid sector, there are some things that have already been done in other parts of Africa. We're trying to introduce that into Nigeria, where we have something called e-mobility. What that is looking at is having electric bikes. So in the rural communities, we realized that the major mode of transportation is either the motorbikes, which is largely used in such communities. So in trying to experiment with this, we're trying to also work with other organizations whereby we bring in electric motorbikes, which will be very, very key for such rural areas, because that's their main mode. They can't afford the typical cars that you have here. So in us, on the developer side, PowerGen and other developers, what we're trying to do is to look at ways by which we can create a market for such communities, whereby we bring in electric bikes and have like a charging station, right? So which will be, of course, running on solar as well. And all they need to do is just pay a token for using that charging station to power their bike.
That's a value chain.
Value chain, So bringing in the bikes is one, then also providing a charging point for them as one. And, with this, with the success of this, we would now obviously take it to a larger level whereby, electric cars coming in, we also have that, available for them in urban areas as well.
Okay, so now let's talk about financing, because at this time when a larger population depend on the grid, the discos are in the picture, and they complain that the tariffs are not cost effective, which is why many times they cannot replace equipment and do restructure and the things that we need to have constant power. Thank God for the idea of the mini-grid, but in order to know that it is sustainable, we have to talk about how effective is the costing or the tariff connected to this. So especially since your first target will be the the off-grid and the rural areas, we know that the supply liquidity there is not very large, So what is the system there to ensure that the tariff is sustainable and for you to be able to capture and still be able to supply, the power that is needed?
All right, that's an interesting question, Nini. Thanks once again. Okay, so for the mini-grid sector, right? Yes, we know that there are tenant issues in the discos till date, and that there are complaints even from, regular users in the discos about the tariff and not having clarity on, how much they're being billed for, power consumed. However, on the mini-grid side, thanks to the REA once again, and of course we have the NERC, which largely regulates tariffs, how the mini-grid sector, implements its tariff across board in communities that we currently serve. And in doing this, we have the MITO tool, which is used in calculating the tariffs that we obviously, charge to the end mile user, the last mile user. Now, in doing that, we also take into cognizance, certain components with the NERC in be able to determine the appropriate tariff that we think is what the rural community member can afford to pay. And in also doing that, there are certain things that we on the developer side also do. We take into cognizance to try as much as possible to, take cognizance of the fact that these communities that we are currently serving do not have the economic might to pay for, a high tariff. So what we also do is try to bring in certain components to aid and cushion the effect of it to them by giving them something like appliance financing. That's an option that's available for them to take up, as well as we also bring in equipments at a lower cost for them. So we also do demand stimulation to try and stimulate demand within these communities by providing them with appropriate equipment that they need to also ensure that they're able to consume power. We also educate them on the need for power and what the difference is between solar power and what you typically know has a disco, and why there's a difference in the costing. Of course, the only difference, the large difference, what is causing the difference in things is the fact that, we still, as a date, still need, government support in terms of subsidizing, equipments that are brought in. And over time, with newer technologies coming in, we actually see that, there might be, potentially an avenue for us to reduce tariff, further within the mini-grid space, But that's not to say it's going to be comparatively with what the discos currently charge. However, these are some of the things that we still continue to work, closely with the REA and continue to review the regulations guiding that. And with time, I think, things will obviously be at a better position for the rural
Is your source of power just solar?
So yes, solar is the basic thing that we currently do in Nigeria. But there are other types of mini grids. You have the wind mini grid, you have turbine. So there are different types. So, but essentially, because in Nigeria, from where we sit, we have a lot of sun here. We don't have, if you were to go into wind, or you probably need somewhere close, like the coastal areas like Lagos. Right. That would be beneficial. But of course, that also needs you to have some amount of data, like over a year's data of wind and stuff like that, that would enable us to be able to go into that. But that's also obtainable in other places in Africa that are closer to the coastal areas. Okay. Yeah.
All right, Job, before we let you go now, talk to us about carbon credits and how Nigeria can actually, profit from this.
Now that's speaking to emissions, right?
Emissions, yes.
To be honest and frank, I think this is something that, the government, through its agencies, can seriously begin to work closely with other international organizations, looking into how we can essentially reduce, our carbon emissions. And one of the key things, which speaks for this administration is the fact that, the support that we get on the developer side towards, bringing renewable energy, that's one of the key things that would really drive, a reduction in carbon emissions in Nigeria. And of course, if there's enough concerted effort and, government collaboration in ensuring that, the renewable energy space, this is speaking over and beyond just the solar mini grids. Right. There are other avenues within renewable energy. If there's a key focus on that and, driving it with the right regulations, the right policies, and putting, value on the table, we would be able to achieve, our carbon credits, in the not too distant future.
Okay. Right. But we don't see this clashing with the grid national supply grid. Because, I mean, for solar, even at this time, it's more expensive.
Yes.
So, and the power is limited. So the number of gadgets or home devices that can be connected, are they limited?
Oh, no.
Can you do the heavy things with this?
Yes, you can. Definitely.
With your mini grid? So
I would have you know that with the mini grid, right, you have the ability to power up everything and anything that you have in your house. The ACs, your fridge, freezer, your, sound system, anything at all, you can power that with a solar mini grid. Everything. I do have one. right, personally, and it's cost efficient, and it saves you a lot of stress. You, of course, like the carbon emission, if you have to put on a generation and all
and
that.
adulteration of the
Exactly. So it's
All
and
right.
we essentially just complement what the discos are doing.
It's
There's no
not
competition.
competition.
There's no competition.
There's
There's a
still
lot
the
of collaboration
parents.
between us and the discos.
So you're complementing.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much,
Thank
Nina.
you.
Nina
Thank you.
Afani Itemugwa is a senior manager, customer experience at PowerGen Renewable Energy, and came to give us some highlights of Minigrid. We'll take a break now.
Thank you so
After the
much.
break, we'll look at Stanbic IBTC asset management, and we're discussing infrastructure funds, talking about infrastructure. That's after the break. Do stay with us. It's Business Morning on Channels Television.